The mysterious surrender. The Great Hall of Harmony station buzzed with tension as representatives from 12 different species gathered for what many hoped would be the final ceremony of the galactic war. The massive viewing ports showed the imposing silhouette of humanity's most feared vessel, the UES Eternal Defiance, floating motionless in the docking bay like a sleeping dragon. Ambassador Thekran of the Vortanian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes with his 6 slender arms, his large black eyes fixed on the human warship that had haunted his people's dreams for 2 years. The ship stretched nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its dark hull scarred from countless battles, but still radiating an aura of deadly power. "Today we finally end this madness," Thekran muttered to his aide, a younger Vortanian named Veltar. "No more will this death machine terrorize innocent worlds." The peace treaty had been clear and unforgiving. All human dreadnoughts were to be surrendered and decommissioned within 90 days of the war's end. The Eternal Defiance was the last and certainly the most dangerous. This single vessel had turned the tide at the Battle of Crimson Nebula, destroyed an entire crystalline coalition fleet at Sigma Draconis, and somehow managed to survive every attempt to destroy it. General Zixtar of the Crystalline Coalition stood nearby, his translucent body pulsing with barely contained anger. The geometric patterns on his crystalline skin shifted from blue to deep red as he stared at the human ship. His people had lost more vessels to the Eternal Defiance than any other single enemy unit. "I still cannot believe they are giving it up so easily," Zixtar said, his voice like grinding crystal. "Humans are known for their stubbornness. Why are they not fighting this surrender?" Captain Elena Vasquez entered the ceremony hall with a small contingent of human officers. Thekran studied her carefully, expecting to see grief or anger in her expression. Instead, the human woman appeared almost relaxed, her dark eyes bright with what looked suspiciously like anticipation. This worried Thekran more than any human battle cry ever had. "Captain Vasquez," Thekran said as she approached the signing table, his translator converting his words into standard galactic. "I trust you understand the gravity of today's proceedings." "Absolutely, Ambassador," Vasquez replied, her smile never wavering. "Humanity is fully committed to the peace process. The Eternal Defiance will be decommissioned exactly as the treaty requires." Council mediator Ash Kor, a tall being from the neutral ethereal collective, raised one of her 4 hands for silence. Her voice resonated through the hall with otherworldly harmonies. "Let us begin the formal transfer. Captain Vasquez, do you formally surrender all military command of the UES Eternal Defiance?" "I do," Vasquez said, placing her palm on the bioscanner. The ship's command codes transferred to the Council's custody with a soft chime that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. "Do you acknowledge that this vessel will be stripped of all weapons, defensive systems, and military equipment?" "I do." "And do you agree that the remaining hull will be disposed of through approved civilian channels?" Vasquez's smile grew wider, and Thekran felt his skin crawl. "I absolutely do, mediator." Thekran had expected the humans to fight the decommissioning tooth and nail, to argue every detail and demand delays. Instead, they seemed almost eager to complete the process. Several times during the ceremony, other human officers whispered things to Vasquez that made her grin broadly. General Zixtar leaned toward Thekran during one of the speeches about galactic peace. "Something is wrong here. Humans will not give up their most powerful weapons without a fight." "I was thinking the same thing," Thekran replied quietly. "They are too cooperative, too cheerful." When the formal proceedings ended, Thekran approached Captain Vasquez. "Captain, I must admit I am surprised by your enthusiasm for this process." "Why wouldn't I be enthusiastic about peace?" Vasquez asked innocently. "Most military commanders would be devastated about losing their most powerful vessel." Vasquez shrugged. "The Eternal Defiance served its purpose during the war. Now it's time for something new." That phrase bothered Thekran for hours after the ceremony ended. Something new. What could that possibly mean? 3 days later, Thekran insisted on inspecting the ship before its final transfer to human civilian authorities. He brought a full team of Vortanian engineers and crystalline technical specialists to verify that the decommissioning was complete. What they found inside the Eternal Defiance left them speechless. The ship had been completely gutted, but not in the way they expected. Every weapon system had been carefully removed, leaving clean, sealed chambers instead of the usual rough demolition work. The armor plating had been selectively stripped, but only in specific areas where new installations appeared to be planned. "This is surgical precision," muttered Chief Engineer Kolvan, as they walked through what had once been the primary weapons bay. They removed everything with millimeter accuracy. The corridors that once housed ammunition now contained strange new fixtures, mounting points for equipment that the aliens didn't recognize. Power conduits had been rerouted in patterns that made no sense for a decommissioned vessel. "Captain Torres," Thekran addressed the human engineer leading their tour, "what exactly happened to all the removed equipment?" "Recycled for civilian projects," Torres replied cheerfully. "Nothing goes to waste in human space. Every bolt, every wire, every power coupling gets used somewhere else." They moved through He Bridge, which had been stripped to bare walls, but again with that same surgical precision. The engineering sections contained only basic life support and maneuvering systems, but those systems were running perfectly. "Where will this hull be taken?" General Zixtar asked. "Phoenix Civilian Construction Consortium has the contract," Torres explained. "They specialize in large-scale civilian projects, space habitats, research stations, that sort of thing." Veltar whispered to Thekran, "Ambassador, this ship's basic structure is in perfect condition. If they were truly scrapping it, why maintain everything so carefully?" That evening, Thekran filed his report with Vortanian High Command. The Eternal Defiance had been successfully decommissioned according to all treaty requirements. The vessel posed no military threat to anyone, yet something nagged at him, a feeling that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. 4 weeks later, the stripped hull of the Eternal Defiance was officially transferred to Phoenix Civilian Construction Consortium. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to approve the transfer, eager to close this final chapter of the war. Captain Vasquez attended the transfer ceremony at the edge of human space. As massive civilian tugs began moving the enormous hull toward the outer system, Thekran approached her one last time. "Any regrets about losing your ship, Captain?" Vasquez watched the departing hull and smiled that same mysterious smile that had troubled him for weeks. "Ambassador, that ship served humanity well during the war. I have a feeling it's going to serve the galaxy even better in peacetime." "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, nothing specific," Vasquez said, but her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Let's just say that humans have always been excellent at repurposing things for new missions. Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Captain Vasquez met with Director Sarah Chen of the Galactic Outreach Initiative. Behind them, a holographic display showed detailed blueprints labeled Project Enlightenment, Mobile Education Platform Conversion. "How long until the first phase is complete?" Vasquez asked. 8 months, Chen replied, her smile matching Vasquez's earlier expression. The Eternal Defiance was perfect for this project. Her size, her power systems, her structural integrity, everything we need for the most ambitious educational initiative in galactic history. Vasquez nodded. "The aliens think we're breaking her down for scrap metal." "Well," Chen said with a grin, "we are repurposing her. They never asked what we were repurposing her into." Outside, construction teams were already preparing for the most revolutionary project humanity had ever attempted. They were going to transform the galaxy's most feared weapon into something no one would see coming, a mobile university that would change everything about how species learned from each other. The war was over, but humanity's real mission was just beginning. The incredible transformation, Commander Zekthar pressed his scaled face against the viewport of his stealth reconnaissance ship, the Shadowseeker, as they approached the coordinates provided by Vortanian intelligence. 6 months had passed since the humans supposedly scrapped the Eternal Defiance, but recent reports suggested something extraordinary was happening in the remote Kepler 442 system. "Are you certain these readings are accurate?" Zekthar asked his sensor operator, a nervous young Vortanian named Pixel. Yes, Commander. 3 separate intelligence networks have confirmed it. The humans are definitely conducting major operations at these coordinates. Zekthar's ship was one of the most advanced stealth vessels in the Crystalline Coalition fleet. If anyone could discover what humanity was really doing with their former Dreadnought, it was his team. The peace treaty allowed for routine monitoring of former military assets, but the humans hadn't exactly advertised what they were doing out here. As they approached the system's outer edge, Zekthar's instruments began detecting massive energy signatures and heavy industrial activity. Whatever the humans were building, it required enormous resources and thousands of workers. "Commander," called out his science officer, Dr. Miranda from the Ethereal Collective, "I'm reading multiple construction platforms, cargo haulers, and what appears to be a massive central structure." When they finally achieved visual contact, Zekthar's jaw dropped open in disbelief. The Eternal Defiance floated in space, but it was no longer the sleek predator they remembered from the war. The massive vessel was surrounded by hundreds of construction ships, worker pods, and cargo haulers. Enormous scaffolding systems covered sections of the hull, and new modules were being attached to every available surface. "By the crystal cores of my ancestors," Zekthar whispered, "what have they done to that ship?" The transformation was breathtaking. Where once there had been weapon emplacements, now there were transparent observation domes. The former missile bays had been converted into what looked like massive greenhouse complexes. Rotating sections that could only be artificial gravity generators for civilian habitation were being installed along the ship's spine. "Commander," Dr. Miranda called out, her voice filled with wonder, "I'm detecting educational facilities, research laboratories, libraries, residential quarters, recreational areas, and... Is that an amphitheater?" Zekthar activated his ship's most powerful sensors for a detailed scan. The results made no sense whatsoever. The humans had kept the ship's basic structure and power systems, but were adding everything needed to support a massive civilian population engaged in learning. "I'm reading classroom complexes that could accommodate thousands of students," reported the sensor operator. "Multiple species life support systems, cultural centers, and what appears to be a massive central library spanning 12 decks." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're being hailed by a human vessel." "Put them through," Zekthar ordered, still trying to process what he was seeing. A friendly human voice filled the bridge. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Rodriguez of the construction ship New Horizons. You're in a designated education zone. Are you here for the campus tour?" "Campus tour?" Zekthar exchanged bewildered glances with his crew. "This is Commander Zekthar of the Crystalline Coalition Intelligence Division," he replied carefully. "I am conducting a routine inspection as permitted by the peace treaty." "Even better," Rodriguez said enthusiastically. "We love showing our work to representatives from other species. Would you like to dock and see what we've accomplished? I think you'll be impressed." An hour later, Zekthar found himself walking through corridors that had once housed the galaxy's most feared weapon systems. The transformation was beyond anything he had imagined possible. The former torpedo bay had been converted into a massive lecture hall with seating for over 1,000 beings from multiple species. Holographic displays showed complex mathematical equations, stellar cartography, and biological diagrams that represented the cutting edge of galactic knowledge. "This used to be our primary weapons storage," explained Dr. Jennifer Park, the human engineer leading their tour. "Now it's the Maxwell Auditorium, named after one of our greatest physicists. We host lectures here from the finest minds across the galaxy." They moved through what had once been the Ammunition Processing Center, now transformed into a series of state-of-the-art laboratories. Crystalline Coalition scientists worked alongside Vortanian researchers and human technicians, sharing equipment and expertise that had been impossible during the war. "How many students does this facility accommodate?" Dr. Miranda asked, her ethereal voice filled with curiosity. "About 12,000 full-time students and researchers," Park replied proudly, "plus another 8,000 faculty members from 47 different species. We're the largest mobile educational institution in galactic history. Zekthar paused at an observation deck that looked out over what had once been the ship's primary reactor chamber. Now it housed a massive hydroponic garden where students from different worlds studied agricultural techniques and shared their knowledge of sustainable food production. "The reactor?" he asked. "Still there," Park grinned, "but now it powers laboratories instead of laser cannons. Same energy, completely different purpose." They continued through corridors lined with dormitories where young beings from species that had been at war just months ago now shared living spaces and study groups. Vortanian poetry hung on walls next to crystalline mathematical theorems and human artistic expressions. The former bridge had been converted into the central administration hub for what the humans called the Galactic University Mobile Campus. Instead of tactical displays showing enemy positions, the screens now showed class schedules, research project status, and collaborative studies between species. "This is impossible," Zekthar muttered to Dr. Miranda as they walked through a library that occupied the entire former weapons control section. "They've turned a weapon of mass destruction into an instrument of mass education," Dr. Miranda finished, her voice filled with awe. The library was stunning. Books, data crystals, and knowledge storage devices from dozens of civilizations filled towering shelves that reached up through multiple decks. Students from species that had been enemies weeks ago sat together at study tables, helping each other understand concepts that had been military secrets during the war. "The most beautiful part," Park explained as they watched a young Vortanian explaining stellar engineering to a group of crystalline students, "is that knowledge grows when it's shared. Every species brings unique perspectives and discoveries. What one civilization struggled with for centuries, another might solve in days." In the former engine room, they found something that made Zekthar's scales tingle with excitement. The humans had built a massive fabrication center where students could take theoretical designs and turn them into working prototypes. "That's a new type of medical scanner designed by a Vortanian human team." Park pointed to a device being tested by a mixed group of students. "And over there, crystalline students are working with our engineers to develop more efficient solar collectors." "You're not just teaching existing knowledge," Dr. Miranda observed. "You're creating new knowledge through collaboration." "Exactly," Park beamed. "When species that think differently work together, innovation explodes. We've made more scientific breakthroughs in the past 3 months than most civilizations achieve in decades." As their tour continued, Zekthar began to understand the true genius of what humanity had done. They hadn't just converted a warship into a school. They had created a mobile catalyst for galactic cooperation and advancement. The ship's former hangar bays now housed shuttle services that transported students and faculty to and from their home worlds. Cultural exchange programs allowed young beings to experience life aboard the ship while sharing their own traditions and knowledge. "How many research projects are currently active?" Zekthar asked, as they observed a laboratory where 3 different species were working together on what appeared to be a new type of faster-than-light communication system. "Over 2,000 active research initiatives," Park replied. "Everything from medical advances to environmental restoration to new technologies that could benefit everyone. And the best part? All research results are shared freely with all member species." In what had once been the ship's war room, Zekthar found the administrative center where representatives from different governments coordinated educational exchanges and research partnerships. The same space that had once planned military strikes now organized cultural festivals and scientific symposiums. "Commander," Dr. Miranda whispered, as they observed a graduation ceremony in the former armory, "they didn't just decommission a warship, they weaponized peace itself." The ceremony was beautiful. Young beings from 12 different species received certificates representing collaborative achievements that would have been impossible during the war. Parents from across the galaxy watched their children graduate together, former enemies now united in the pursuit of knowledge. Captain Rodriguez found them as the tour concluded. "So, what do you think of our little project?" "Little?" Zekthar laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd experienced since the war ended. "You've created something unprecedented in galactic history. The Etern." Defiance was famous for destruction, Rodriguez said thoughtfully. Now she's going to be famous for creation. Same power, same determination, completely different mission. As Zekthar's ship departed the transformed vessel, he realized that humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had taken their most feared weapon and turned it into their greatest gift to the galaxy. The ship that had once terrorized entire systems now carried hope, knowledge, and cooperation to the stars. Back aboard his stealth ship, Zekthar prepared his report for Crystalline Coalition Command. But instead of a military threat assessment, he found himself writing a recommendation for educational exchange programs. The war was truly over, and humanity had shown them all what victory really looked like. Not conquest or domination, but the transformation of weapons into wisdom, of fear into understanding, and of enemies into teachers. The Eternal Defiance continued her journey through space, no longer a harbinger of destruction, but a beacon of what was possible when different species chose to learn from each other instead of fight. And across the galaxy, other civilizations began to wonder what miracles they might achieve if they followed humanity's remarkable example.